I never imagined that taking my husband's name would become the biggest controversy in my entire family. Growing up, I always thought changing your last name after marriage was simple, almost automatic. You fall in love, you get married, you take your husband's surname. Just like my mother, my aunts, and practically every woman I'd ever known. I never questioned it. But life has a funny way of turning the things you think are simple into the most chaotic experiences you could ever imagine. When I married Aaron, I was the happiest woman alive. He was everything I had prayed for, calm, loyal, gentle, and the kind of man who stood by his word. I didn't have a single doubt in my heart when I signed the marriage license and wrote Lydia Harrow for the first time. I felt proud, like I was stepping into a new chapter of my life. But the moment I shared my new name online, everything shifted. My phone exploded with notifications, not the sweet kind. My cousins, old classmates, even co-workers were laughing at my name. At first, I didn't understand why. Harrow wasn't a strange name. It wasn't funny. So what was the problem? Then my sister sent me a screenshot that made my face go numb. Apparently, Lydia Harrow sounded identical to a character from a dark, cult-favorite horror game that I had never even heard of. A creepy, ghost-like woman who wandered abandoned buildings and whispered unsettling things to the player. She was infamous online. People role-played as her, made memes, edited my photo with glowing red eyes, and even wrote comments like, "Oh no, she's awakened," and "Pray for us, the demon bride has returned." I felt sick. For the first time, my own name, something I had taken so lightly, became a joke to thousands of strangers. And it only got worse when co-workers started saying it too. One of them actually printed a picture of that horror character and pasted it on my locker. Another whispered when I walked past, "Careful, she might curse you." They laughed, but I didn't. I felt humiliated. When I came home that day, Aaron immediately noticed something was wrong. He dropped his backpack, rushed to me, and held my shoulders. "Lydia, what happened?" he asked, eyes full of concern. I showed him the messages and the memes. His expression dropped into something between shock and guilt. "Oh God, I didn't know," he whispered. "Didn't know what?" I asked. He hesitated, then slowly explained that his last name, Harrow, was actually a well-known surname in a series he used to play in high school. The horror character wasn't something he expected people to still remember, and he thought nobody in my circle would even know about it. But the internet has a way of keeping things alive forever. I wanted to be angry at him. I really did. But he looked so apologetic that the anger inside me evaporated before it could fully form. He wasn't the problem. The world was. Still, the internet wasn't the only issue. The real trouble started when my mother found out. She called me early the next morning, her voice trembling dramatically, as always. "Lydia, tell me it's not true." "What's not true?" I groaned, barely awake. "That you changed your name. That you abandoned your father's name." I pulled the blanket off my legs and sat up. "Mom, I didn't abandon anything. I just took my husband's last name. People do it every day." "But we are not people," she snapped. "We are Morgans. You come from a line that should be honored, not replaced. Do you know how it looks? Your cousins kept their names. Even your grandmother kept it." I rubbed my forehead, trying to stay calm. "Mom, it's my choice. I'm married now." "Well, your choice makes us look weak," she hissed. "And your sister is furious too. She says she's embarrassed because people keep tagging her in posts about you." "Posts?" I repeated. "What posts?" "Oh, you haven't seen? Look at your phone." "I can't talk anymore." She hung up. My stomach twisted. I opened my social media, and there it was, a viral thread with nearly 40,000 likes. Someone had posted a side-by-side picture of me and the horror character captioned, "She took the name, and now she looks like her." Hundreds of comments laughed, joked, and compared us. A few defended me, but not enough to drown out the noise. And people kept tagging my sister, who had a big following. No wonder she felt dragged into it. When I called her, she didn't even let me speak. "Why couldn't you keep things simple?" she snapped. "Now everyone thinks I'm related to some creepy demon girl. They're calling me Sister of Harrow." "It's just a name," I whispered. "No, it's humiliation," she said coldly. "Fix it." That word echoed in my mind. Fix it. As if I had done something wrong. As if choosing to take my husband's name was some kind of insult to my entire bloodline. As if their embarrassment mattered more than my marriage. That night, while Aaron and I were having dinner, I found myself staring at him. Really staring. Not because I doubted him, but because I doubted myself. Was I ready to deal with this forever? Every introduction, every email, every official document. Would they all come with mockery? He noticed me zoning out and put down his fork. "Talk to me," he said softly. I told him everything: my mom, my sister, the viral posts, the coworkers, the humiliation. I expected him to be frustrated or tell me to ignore everyone. But he didn't. He just held my hand and said, "If it's too much, you don't have to keep my name. It doesn't change anything between us." That made my eyes sting. He wasn't controlling. He wasn't possessive. He cared about me more than tradition. But the thought of giving up his name felt like giving up a part of the new life I was building. Yet keeping it felt like inviting endless trouble. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about who I was, Lydia Morgan or Lydia Harrow. Who did I want to be? And why was everyone else so affected by a choice that was supposed to be mine alone? At 3 a.m., frustrated and exhausted, I opened my laptop and typed my name into the search bar. Instantly, the horror character popped up again. Thousands of images. Fan art. Creepy edits. I clicked on one by mistake, a video clip of the character whispering, "Whoever carries my name carries my fate," in a chilling voice. A cold shiver ran down my spine. The next morning, someone slid a note under our door. I picked it up with trembling fingers and unfolded it slowly. It said, "Why did you choose that name? Don't you know the curse?" My blood ran cold. And that was the moment I realized. This wasn't just a joke anymore. It was becoming something much darker. The first week after taking my husband's last name was supposed to feel magical, like a new chapter with a beautiful beginning. Instead, it felt like I had stepped into some alternate universe where everyone knew something I didn't. It wasn't the name change itself that bothered me. It was the strange reactions that followed. The whispers, the stares, the awkward pauses. Every time someone heard me say my full married name, their eyebrows would lift in a way that made my stomach twist. I kept telling myself I was overthinking it, but deep down I knew something wasn't normal. I tried brushing it off, but it kept piling up. The first incident had been at the bank, then at the pharmacy, then with the apartment manager. By the time a grocery store cashier stopped mid-scan to look at my receipt twice, I was starting to feel like my name carried some kind of curse. I confronted my husband about it that night. He barely looked up from his laptop. "You're imagining things," he insisted. "People react weirdly to name changes all the time. It's just paperwork confusion." But I wasn't imagining the way the cashier's face had drained of color when she saw my name. I wasn't imagining the way the pharmacist whispered something to her coworker before handing me my bag. I certainly wasn't imagining the flash of disbelief on the apartment manager's face. Still, I decided to stay quiet for a few days. I didn't want to seem paranoid. Then came the moment that pushed me past my limit. It was a Thursday afternoon, bright and hot, and I was heading to the DMV to update my ID. I rehearsed my signature on the way. My new signature, the one that still felt unfamiliar. I waited in line for almost an hour before my number was called. The woman behind the counter was older, probably in her 60s, with glasses that hung from a chain around her neck. "Name?" she asked without looking up. I handed her the form. She lifted it, glanced at the paper, and then slowly raised her eyes to look at me. Her expression didn't match the casual tone she'd had before. Her mouth parted just slightly. You're taking that name?" she asked, voice quieter now. "Yes," I said, blinking. "It's my husband's last name." For a moment, she didn't say anything. She just studied me like she was trying to figure out if I was joking or if I had willingly signed my life away. Then she swallowed. "Well," she said cautiously, "that's your choice." My heart thudded. That tiny hesitation, that strange emphasis on your choice, felt like a red flag being waved right in my face. "What does that mean?" I asked. She shook her head. "Nothing. I just haven't seen anyone use that name in a while." "In a while?" I repeated. "Why? What's wrong with the name?" "Ma'am," she said gently, almost apologetically, "I can't get into personal details, but let's just say it has a history." "A history? Not a normal history." Her tone said it was the kind you whispered about behind closed doors. "Is it something I should be concerned about?" I asked, feeling a nervous tremor creeping into my voice. She paused again. "I think you should talk to your husband." That was all she said. No explanation, no hint, nothing more. Just talk to your husband. And the way she said it made me certain that if she could have told me more, she would have. I left the DMV with my new temporary ID and a knot so tight in my stomach it hurt to breathe. I sat in my car, gripping the steering wheel, trying to calm the flood of thoughts racing through my mind. What kind of history did my new name have? Why did people react like they already knew me, and not in a good way? Why wasn't my husband bothered by any of this? By the time I got home, I had rehearsed what I would say. But when I opened the door and saw him sitting casually on the couch watching TV, as if nothing odd was happening in our lives, all the words tangled together. "Can we talk?" I asked. He muted the TV. "Sure. What's up?" I told him everything. Every strange reaction, every unsettling moment, every whisper and pause. I told him about the DMV lady's comment. I didn't leave anything out. When I finished, I waited for him to laugh or reassure me, or at least sound sympathetic. But instead, he looked irritated. "You're seriously still on this?" he said. "People in this town gossip about everything. My family has been here for generations. The name has been around forever. Of course people know it." "That's not what I mean," I said, feeling frustrated. "There's something more. Something you're not telling me." He sighed loudly. "You're making this bigger than it is. There's nothing weird about the name." But he didn't meet my eyes. And that told me more than anything he said. "If there's something I should know," I pressed, "just tell me. Please." He finally glanced at me, but his expression wasn't reassuring. It was defensive. "My name is my name," he said firmly. "It's the same name my father, my grandfather, and my great-grandfather had. End of story." That didn't comfort me at all. If anything, it deepened my concern. Later that night, while he showered, my mind kept circling around the same thought. People weren't reacting to him. They were reacting to me. The new one with the name. The one who didn't know the history attached to it. I Googled it again, trying different spellings, variations, formats, anything. But nothing came up. Not a single unusual link. No scandals, no criminal records, no dark family history. Almost like the online world had been scrubbed clean. Which made it even worse. The next day, something happened that shattered whatever denial I had left. I was at a small cafe downtown ordering coffee. When I told the barista my name for the order, she froze. Not paused, froze. Her hand literally stopped midair above the cup. She looked up at me with wide eyes. "You're related to them?" she whispered. "Them," I repeated, my skin prickling. She quickly shook her head. "Never mind." I didn't say anything. "No, wait, what do you mean them?" But she wouldn't speak. Instead, she scribbled something on the cup so fast it barely looked like handwriting and practically ran to the espresso machine. I stood there feeling cold all over. When my drink was ready, she didn't call my name. She just placed the cup on the counter and walked away. Anxiety crawled up my spine. I picked up the cup and went outside. When I finally looked at the name she had written, my breath caught. It wasn't my first name. It wasn't my husband's last name. It was one short word. One I didn't recognize. One that definitely wasn't mine, but one she clearly thought belonged to me now. And beneath it, barely legible, were 3 small letters. Almost like initials. I stared at it as fear thickened in my throat. Whatever was happening, it wasn't a coincidence anymore. And it was very clear that everyone else knew something I didn't. When I walked into the house that night, the silence felt heavier than any argument could have. It wrapped around the rooms, thick and accusing, as if the walls themselves knew I had crossed a line simply by asking questions. Ethan was in the kitchen washing dishes with the kind of focus you only see in someone trying to avoid their own thoughts. His shoulders were tense, his jaw tight, and I could tell he had something ready to say, maybe anger, maybe regret, maybe fear. But the moment he looked at me, everything inside him dissolved. Instead, he gave me a tired nod, like the weight of the entire day had settled onto him, and he had no space left for more. I walked up beside him, unsure where to begin. "Are you still upset?" I asked quietly. He shook his head. "I'm not upset, just confused." He put the dish down slowly. "I didn't know any of this weirdness came with my name. If I had, maybe I would have warned you." His voice cracked just slightly, and that scared me more than anything else. Ethan wasn't someone who cracked. He was steady, calm, the one who made jokes during emergencies and handled chaos with a shrug. Seeing him shaken left me feeling like the ground beneath us had shifted. "I'm the one who should have asked more questions," I said. "But Ethan, your aunt talked to me like I should know some kind of family, ritual or rule. What did she mean?" He dried his hands slowly, looking like a man wrestling with an answer he didn't want to give. "My family has stories," he said finally. "Old, strange ones. Most of them are just folklore. Or at least we treat them like folklore. I didn't think any of it mattered in real life. But clearly it does," I insisted. Why else would everyone be acting so strange about my new name? He hesitated again, then sighed, finally allowing himself to say what he had been avoiding. There's something you should know. In my family, names aren't just names. The words hung in the air like a storm cloud. I almost laughed because it sounded ridiculous, but something in his expression told me this wasn't the moment to find humor in anything. What does that mean? I asked. Before he could answer, his phone buzzed. He looked down at the screen, frowned, and showed me. It was one word. Tonight. No sender. No number. Just the word. My stomach clenched. Who is that from? My aunt, he said reluctantly. She uses some encrypted weird system. Been doing it for years. I don't know why. I stared at the message again. Tonight for what? He rubbed his temples. A family meeting, I'm guessing. And they must want you there. I don't want to go, I said instantly. You have to, he replied, and the certainty in his voice chilled me. My family doesn't call meetings often. When they do, it usually means they're about to enforce a tradition. And since this is about your name, I didn't even realize I had stepped back from him until my shoulders hit the wall. Enforce a tradition? What kind? Ethan didn't answer. That silence was louder than anything he could have said. Later that evening, I found myself sitting in our car, gripping my seatbelt like it might save me. The streets were quiet, dim streetlights flickering in patterns that didn't feel random anymore. Ethan kept glancing at me, his knuckles tight around the steering wheel. He wasn't trying to scare me, but he also wasn't telling me enough to calm me. The house we arrived at wasn't just a house, it was a mansion. A looming, ivy-covered structure that felt older than the town itself. I had been here once before for a holiday dinner, but walking toward it now felt like stepping into something ancient, something waiting, something that already knew my name. Inside, the living room was filled with Ethan's relatives, dozens of them, sitting in a perfect circle. Too perfect. Their eyes lifted in unison when we entered, and the silence that followed felt rehearsed. His aunt was the first to speak. She didn't smile. You took the name, she said to me, her voice low and almost reverent. The choice is made. I swallowed. I didn't know there were conditions. Names carry power, she replied. Our family name especially. When a woman takes it, she accepts the role of its keeper. I don't understand, I whispered. You don't need to understand yet. You just need to listen. Ethan stepped forward. Aunt Clara, this is too much. You can't scare her like this. She didn't grow up with these stories. She should have, Aunt Clara snapped. Because now she is one of us. I looked at Ethan for help, but he was staring at his shoes, jaw clenched. Something inside me cracked open. He did no more. Maybe not everything, but enough. Enough to be afraid. What is this role I've supposedly taken? I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. Aunt Clara walked toward me slowly, her steps heavy with purpose. When she stopped in front of me, she reached into her pocket and took out a folded piece of yellowed paper. She placed it gently into my hand. This, she said, is the list of those who carried the name before you. Every woman who has taken it for more than 100 years. Their stories. Their responsibilities. Their warnings. I unfolded the paper with trembling fingers. It wasn't typed, it was written in old ink, fading in places. And the last 3 names were still wet, like they had been added recently. One name stood out. The last one. It was mine. I felt a cold shock ripple through me. You wrote this before I even agreed to take the name. Aunt Clara didn't blink. We knew you would. How? I croaked. Because the name chooses. She leaned in close, her eyes sharp. And it chose you long before you met Ethan. A wave of nausea hit me. That's impossible. Is it? She asked calmly. Look at the dates. Look at the pattern. I looked again, and my heart dropped into my stomach. Every woman on the list had taken the name exactly 7 months after meeting their husbands, down to the exact day. I met Ethan 7 months before our wedding, and I changed my name 7 months after that. This is crazy, I whispered. Aunt Clara shook her head. This is our legacy. This is the truth. And tonight, you will learn what it means to carry it. The lights flickered. The candles behind the circle hissed and flared. And every person in that room leaned forward at the same time, as if pulled by an invisible thread. Ethan finally grabbed my hand, squeezing it hard. Don't be scared, he whispered. But his voice was shaking. And that terrified me more than anything else. The morning after my meltdown felt strangely quiet, almost like the world had taken a step back to watch what I would do next. I woke up with that heavy feeling in my chest, the kind that always comes after crying so hard you fall asleep without realizing it. My eyes were puffy, my throat felt dry, and the room was still filled with the emotional debris of everything that had come crashing down the night before. For a moment, I stared at the ceiling and wondered if I'd dreamt all of it. Me screaming at Daniel, me telling him how humiliated I felt by my new married name, me admitting out loud that I didn't feel like myself anymore, and me finally breaking after carrying the weight of everyone's jokes, comments, and subtle digs for so long. But the sting in my chest reminded me it was all real, and very much unresolved. Daniel wasn't beside me. His side of the bed was cold. I sat up slowly, bracing myself for what might come next. A fight? Another denial? Another attempt to convince me it wasn't a big deal? I wrapped the blanket around myself and walked to the living room. He was sitting on the couch, elbows on his knees, his hands clasped together. He looked like he had been waiting, maybe all night, for me to come out. His eyes lifted when he heard my footsteps. "You slept early," he said quietly. "I cried myself to sleep," I corrected, my voice flat. He exhaled, shoulders sagging, as if those words hit him harder than he expected. "I know, and I'm sorry. I should have listened sooner. I should have taken it seriously when you first told me how you felt." I crossed my arms, not ready to melt into sympathy. It wasn't just how I felt. It was how everyone made me feel. You know what your brother said at dinner? Your coworkers made jokes. Even at the gym, someone said it out loud like it was some sort of punchline. How is that supposed to feel normal? He nodded slowly. I didn't realize how bad it had gotten. When you told me the first time, I thought you were overthinking. When you told me the second time, I thought people would eventually move on. But last night, you finally said everything you'd been holding in. And I'm sorry I didn't push you to say it earlier. I didn't speak. I didn't trust my voice not to shake. He stood up, walked toward me, then hesitated as if waiting for permission to get closer. When I didn't move away, he slipped his arms gently around me. "I don't care about the name. I care about you. And if changing it back makes you feel like yourself again, we'll do it. Together." For a moment, I leaned my forehead against his chest, letting the warmth of him quiet the storm inside me. "I didn't want to hurt you," I whispered. "I just didn't want to carry something I never agreed to. Something that makes people look at me like I'm a joke." "You're not a joke," he said firmly. "Not to me. Not to anyone who actually matters." I pulled back and looked at him. "Then why did no one speak up? Not you, not your family. No one said anything when it started." He rubbed the back of his neck. "Because I thought it was one of those harmless things families tease about. I didn't think it would stick. And honestly, I didn't know it hurt you this much." "That's the thing," I said quietly. "It wasn't harmless to me." We stood there in the soft morning light for a long moment, each trying to understand the other in ways we hadn't before. And for the first time in weeks, I felt like he was truly hearing me. He motioned toward the table where a stack of papers Saturday. I printed the forms. "For the name change. If you want to go back to your maiden name, or choose something else, or even create a hyphenated one, whatever makes you feel right, we'll do it." My heart thudded in my chest. "You did that this morning?" I asked. "Actually," he said with a small, guilty smile, "I did it last night. After you fell asleep." Something warm softened in my chest. "Thank you," I whispered. "But," he added, "this isn't just about paperwork. It's about us. I don't ever want you to feel like you're losing your identity because of me." I nodded. "And I don't want you to feel like I'm rejecting your family." He laughed softly. "My family would survive. Trust me, they'll tease for a day and then get over it. They always do." I wasn't so sure about that, but the warmth in his voice made me want to believe him. He grabbed my hand. "Come on, let's go for a drive." "A drive? Where?" "You'll see." We drove for 15 minutes in comfortable silence until he pulled into a quiet park we'd visited when we first started dating. The one where we'd carved our initials into the wooden bench. He took me to that same bench now, the carving still faintly visible, softened by years but still there, a reminder of us before everything got complicated. "This is where we talked about our future," he said. "About what we wanted. And we promised we'd keep choosing each other, even when things got messy." I swallowed, remembering that conversation as clearly as if it had happened yesterday. "So I'm choosing you again," he continued. "Not the name. Not the expectation. Just you." Tears prickled my eyes, but this time they weren't from pain. They were from something gentler, warmer, easier to breathe through. "I don't want a name to define me," I said. "I just want to feel like myself again." Then let's make that happen, he replied. We sat there for a long time, watching the morning shift into early afternoon, the sunlight dancing through the trees. And somewhere in that quiet, something settled between us. Something that had been shaky for weeks suddenly found its footing again. Later, when we drove home, I knew exactly what I wanted to do. I wanted to reclaim myself, not because I was leaving him or leaving our life, but because I wanted to stand in it without feeling like a stranger. When we got back, I took a deep breath, opened the forms, and filled them out with steady hands. Are you sure? Daniel asked gently. Yes, I said. I'm sure. He smiled, relieved. Then let's turn the page. Together. And for the first time in a long time, I felt like my name, whatever it would be, belonged to me again.